He wasn't guessing, he was hunting. From his first encounters with Dexter, Sergeant James Doakes didn't just sense something off, he started building a quiet case the rest of Miami Metro refused to see. Today, I'll show you the receipts that prove Doakes wasn't paranoid, he was early, methodical, and right. This is commentary and critique for education and entertainment. Major spoilers ahead. Start with the man's instrument panel. Doakes reads hands before faces, breathing before words, posture before alibis. He's not dazzled by Dexter's lab geek persona because he's trained to watch the small betrayals, how a body relaxes at a crime scene when most people tense, how a gaze holds steady when normal eyes flinch. Drop your favorite episode and a one-line theory in the comments. How early did you clock that Doakes had him? Season 1 lays the groundwork. At multiple scenes, Doakes notices that Dexter is too comfortable around blood, too quick with calm analysis when others are rattled. He doesn't call him the Bay Harbor Butcher. He files a human profile, low resting pulse, controlled affect, micro reactions that line up with someone who rehearses emotions instead of feeling them. There's a moment after a colleague survives an attack that tells you everything. Relief surges through the bullpen. People hug, the air loosens. Dexter, instead, edges for the elevator like a man stepping out of a theater. Doakes blocks him. He wants to know if Dexter feels anything at all. That's not a gotcha, it's a diagnostic probe of a warrior who can smell adrenaline and the lack of it. Early season 2, Doakes shadows Dexter in a parking lot. He doesn't rush the tale, he uses a blind spot, the way soldiers learn to disappear in daylight. Dexter lies smoothly when confronted, too smoothly for a lab tech who supposedly hates confrontation. Doakes doesn't blow up. He updates his risk model. The man is trained, or at least conditioned, to manage stress at a level that doesn't belong in a simple analyst. Here's your first curiosity loop. If Doakes already had the profile, why didn't he move sooner? Hold that. The answer arrives with the strongest receipt after a chain of smaller ones that make it inevitable. Doakes is not a bureaucrat, he is a pattern reader. While Miami Metro gets seduced by spectacle, Doakes reads method, clean restraint, contain and dump discipline, blade work that suggests ritual and control rather than rage. Whoever is doing this understands how to keep a heart rate low while standing over a ruined body. How many such men do you know who punch a clock inside the evidence room? Fans who argue Doakes was just biased miss something crucial. He tests his own theory by trying to falsify it. He watches Dexter slip at the edges, then looks for a normal explanation before he tightens the noose. That's why a later misread of Dexter's nah meeting pulls him off the scent for a moment. Doakes isn't scared to be wrong. He's scared to accuse without proof. That's the difference between obsession and discipline. Let's pay off the earlier loop a little. He doesn't move sooner because he's still assembling receipts that would hold up beyond gut feeling. He knows something everyone else ignores. If you accuse and miss, you don't get a second swing at a hunter like Dexter. You get a knife in the dark or a career in flames. So he waits and he watches. Receipts stack. Dexter's social mask slips in tiny ways, too eager to volunteer at the worst moments, too blank when empathy would be effortless for any normal friend. Doakes clocks the hands after a bad night, the stiffness around the knuckles, the way fingers place an object on a table as if measuring distance and leverage. He doesn't say, "I see the plastic." He thinks, "Bind and wrap muscle memory." There's a confrontation at the shipping yard that fans remember because it's the first time the mask tears audibly. Dexter's excuse work fails. Doakes responds with force, not to win a fight, but to test for unexpected resistance. Dexter's counter proves two things. He can handle himself, and he's been hiding that competence from everyone who thinks he's a harmless lab rat. That's not a personality quirk, that's operational security. Counter theory time. Some argue Doakes hated Dexter from day one and saw what he wanted to see. If that were true, he would have dragged Dexter into a room, screamed, and lost. Instead, he isolates variables like a pro, surveillance first, pressure second, a search for credible artifacts third. When he's briefly convinced Dexter's odd behavior might be explained by addiction, he actually backs off. That's what honest hunters do. They re-rate the model and wait for the next truth to present itself. Now the receipts go from behavioral to physical, At one point, Doakes gets access to something deeply personal that Dexter never meant anyone to see, a hidden set of trophies that rewrite Dexter's smile into a confession. He doesn't grandstand. He moves to get them analyzed, away from the politics of Miami, as if he understands that the city itself might bend around Dexter's charm. That's not bias, that's spine. Dexter counters like a chess player who understands people, process, and optics. A manipulated report here, a provoked reaction there, and suddenly Doakes looks unstable in front of the very colleagues he's trying to protect. That headbutt, you remember, is not a tantrum, it's a deployed weapon. Dexter walks away knowing exactly how the room will interpret the aftermath. The turning point arrives when Doakes tracks the boat. There's nothing cinematic about it, just a GPS reality that cuts through all the talk. The trail leads to a hideaway where the decor is plastic, the tools are quiet, and the air itself seems to hold its breath. That's where Doakes' restraint finally meets Dexter's truth. He levels the weapon, calls it as it is, and gets a bullet into Dexter's thigh for his trouble. What follows in that cabin is not a villain monologue, it's two predators testing each other's codes. Dexter's body knows the geography, the fight collapses into water and wood and blunt edges. Doakes ends up caged. And then, something most people miss starts to happen. The two men speak in a way that strips away performance. Doakes rejects Dexter's attempt to make them the same, but he accepts a harder truth. He recognizes darkness because he's lived beside it. Ethics line. Before we push to the end game, we do not glamorize violence here. We examine craft, psychology, and the logic that a story uses to point two men toward a collision. The focus is on why choices make sense for who these characters are, not on celebrating harm. Back to the cage. Dexter's calculus shifts in the face of a man who won't bend. Doakes doesn't beg, doesn't barter. He insists on reality. Dexter toys with the idea of turning himself in rare light through a crack in the mask, but the story refuses them both, a clean resolution. The explosion that kills Doakes is not a moral victory for Dexter, it's a narrative bomb that frees the monster while framing the only cop brave enough to say its name. This is where you place the strongest receipt. Doakes had already solved it. He had the behavioral profile, the pattern method, the physical trophies, the boat. He put eyes on the room where the killing life lived. In a fairer world, that chain of evidence would be enough to pull the wolf's fur right off the sheep. In this world, that chain gets twisted back around his neck. Let's revisit the other side's best case. Maybe Doakes was predisposed to see killers everywhere because of his special forces past. Even if you grant that premise, the receipts break the theory. Bias doesn't plant hidden trophies. Bias doesn't program a GPS. Bias doesn't find you in the one cabin a man never intended a colleague to see. Those are not vibes. Those are facts. There's also the matter of isolation. Doakes is a loner, yes, but not because he hates people. He's a loner because he won't play nice with lies. Watch how his family warms to anyone who brings softness into the room. Doakes can't mimic that warmth, and he knows it. Isolation sharpens his eye. It removes the social grease that lets a charming sociopath slide through a precinct like a knife through silk. If you map the full timeline, you get an elegant progression. Season 1, Doakes notices the man, not the myth. Early Season 2, he shifts from feelings to surveillance. Mid-Season 2, he finds physical artifacts that change the case. Late Season 2, he arrives at the scene of truth and says the quiet part out loud. Each step narrows probability until only one conclusion remains. There's a bitter grace to the way the story redeems none of this. The explosion erases a witness and writes a lie into the department's file system. The blood slides become poison in Doakes' own hands. The boat logs accuse him without mercy. The very traits that let him see Dexter discipline, suspicion, refusal to look away become the pretext to brand him as the butcher. Before we close, ask yourself this. If Doakes had been a little less right, would he have lived longer? Or was his accuracy the very reason the story had to remove him? That's the kind of question the show wants you to sit with, because it turns the lens back on us, how we reward charm, how we punish certainty, how we mistrust a man who refuses to smile for our comfort. Let me cash out the early promise. You wanted the receipt that proves he wasn't guessing. It's the combination, not one artifact, the train tail, the elevator red, the shipping yard test, the private trophies, the boat trail, the cabin room. You cannot arrive at that room by hate alone. You arrive there by courage and discipline, and Doakes had both. Type, I saw the receipts, if you'll rewatch that cabin sequence with this lens. And if you think there's one earlier moment that beats all of these, tell me where it sits in the timeline and why the rest of Miami missed it. Verdict. Doakes didn't just suspect Dexter, he solved Dexter. The tragedy is that the story let the solved man keep walking while the solver burned. Subscribe to Scene Autopsy, where we solve television mysteries with receipts.